rebuilding confidence, and harmonizing with nature. With over 4 decades of changing lives, your self-discovery archaeologist, get ready to be the best of you with your host, Beverly Zymet.
Welcome to the Beverly Zymet Show, where being the best you can be has just gotten easier. My guest today is Shaunice Jones. She's calling in from Indianapolis, Indiana. Is that correct?
Maryville, Indiana.
Maryville, Indiana. Okay,
Yeah.
where about is Maryville from Indianapolis?
We're about 2 hours away. Like a 2 hour. Yeah.
Okay.
A drive, like 200 miles. Not too far.
Yeah. Well, Indiana's kind of this long, skinny state anyway, right?
Right. We don't have much.
I know one thing Indiana has, because I'm an RV fanatic, right? And I live on the road. And there are so many places in Indiana that build these RVs, right? So
Oh, wow.
yeah. It's like, okay, I'll check this one out, right? And it's like, well, of course it's Indiana, right?
Right.
I'm
I'm going to have to look into that because I've been here my whole life. I never knew it was the state to make RVs. I have to look into that because I want one.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I had a friend of mine, we were talking RVs and stuff, right? And she was kind of looking in different directions. And I said, hey, look at this one. So she did. She goes, oh, they make them in Indiana. And I was like, well, that's not really too far. We're over here in Farmington, New Mexico area, just outside of that, right? You know, so it's kind of a diagonal, right? So
Right.
Right. So, well, my friend, what is it that you do? Share with the audience what you do out there in Maryville, Indiana.
Well, right now, me and my best friend, we're going coming together to collide our businesses. So she has a daycare that she has, and then on my end, I mentor young girls from ages 16 to age 30, and I help them to find their purpose, to be the best that they can be, to bring the best out of them, the tools and the things that they don't even know that's in them. You know, what 16-year-old know?
Exactly.
That they have greatness in them.
They know everything, though.
I didn't believe it. So I help them, and my story is relatable, so they gravitate to me because I'm not your average Christian. I am a Christian. I believe in God, but however, my background has a lot of holes and loops in them. I was in an abusive relationship for 13 years. I had my first child when I was 16. Actually at 14 when my child actually died. And then at 16, I had my first child. And from age 17 to age 28, when I finally walked away from my abuser, I had 8 children in between that time frame. So from age 16 to age 28, I had 8 children.
Oh, so my gosh, girl, don't you know what causes that?
Yes. So I had to do this, and he had to go that way.
Yeah, no kidding. It's like, whoa, enough is enough, right?
enough. And so when I tell them my story, I have eyes all to me like, oh, that happened, this happened, and you did that, or, my story is very relatable. So I help ages from age 30 to find their identity in Christ, to find their purpose, their talents, and their gifts. Because a lot of people don't know that they have their gifts will make room for them, or their gift will open doors for them. Right. They go and they work for people. You don't have to work. Everybody's not called to be an entrepreneur. I understand that. But maybe you're an entrepreneur and you can work alongside with someone. I know for me and my best friend, I'm not a technical person. She's like very technical with computers. She designed different things for her daycare. She makes curriculums. So anything designed and technical, she handles.
That's a great match, right? I've got a partner like that. He does all the techie stuff, and I get to do what I do best, and that's talk to you guys.
Hey, just let me talk, and I also just published my very first book. It's called Heal So Summer. Healing from a broken
Congratulations.
soul. Thank you. I was very ecstatic about that. I published that. I want to believe it was March 11th, and it's really making an impact. I have different testimonials that they coming in saying how my story is giving them life to for them to know that they can actually be themselves and they don't have to be no one else but themselves. A lot of people when they don't know who they are, they
Right.
pretend to be who everybody say that they are, or they pretend to act like they know what they want, but they don't really know.
Right.
So
Oh,
I
that,
help them in that area.
yeah. Oh, that is so true. We look at what is our identity, and if you start having children at that early age, right? What
Mm-hmm.
do you know about motherhood? What do you know about life? What do you know about yourself?
Yes.
Because
And
that's
I
a
didn't know nothing.
right, right. But you knew that this child was
Hmm.
your responsibility now. And it makes
Yeah,
you grow up really fast, right? So,
it
what is it
does.
that you're going to do with this child? This child
To
didn't
be
ask to be
honest,
born, but
yes,
it's
but to be
here.
honest, from 16, I wasn't, you know how some people like, oh, motherhood, that's what they kept telling me. I'm like, how do I do this? They're like, oh, motherhood come easy. I didn't have that story. I didn't
No,
have
it
that story.
doesn't.
They feel it's like an instant, what did they say? It's like an instant, it's name, it just come natural. I didn't have that story because at 16, after I was ecstatic when I found out I was pregnant, but in my mind, I was replacing that baby I lost at 14. So
Right.
now I have a baby can hold. But then he was born, and now I got to feed him, change his diaper, and I got to be a mom at
Yep.
16.
And you know what?
I ran.
That kid doesn't go away for 18 years,
Yes,
and then they still don't go away.
he's 14 with a
Yeah.
lot of mouth. But
It, you know,
I'm so surprised at how mature he is due to the fact I had him so young. And he was
right.
basically raised with me because he saw all my loops and my good and my bad. So to see how mature he is today, he's a straight A student. He's
Oh, that's awesome.
he's just a good kid. I'm looking at him like, where did you come from? Because I wasn't a good mother at 16.
Well, we have to look at these things as not being good or bad, right? We do
Right,
with what we know. And love
right,
plays a big role in that, right? And when you
yes.
come from that heart and you're working in that avenue, kids will pick up on that, and it's
Mm,
keeping them in that space to where they know that they're loved and they're not mistreated, and it is a huge responsibility, and again, where do you go? Because a lot of times these kids, at 16 or younger, aren't always accepted back into the home because the
right.
parent doesn't want to take care of another child, right? It's their
Mhm.
grandchild, but at the same time it's like, well, what do you do here, right? And
Yeah,
it's
and what
like,
I have learned and have seen, majority of the time that young girls is having a baby at 16, 17 years old, their mother had them at an early age. So
exactly,
theirs is the fact that your child repeated the same cycle that you repeated, that they
right?
don't want nothing to do with because they know how hard it was for them. But then you have those that actually was successful having their child at an early age that will actually help their child get to where they are. So I want to say it's like depending on what you're birthed into, because
Right.
a person that's birthed into success, they have that roadmap to success that their mother could teach them success versus someone that's in poverty and their child have a child in poverty, then it's like I don't want nothing to do with it because I don't even have my stuff together. So there goes that
Exactly,
angry
exactly.
dad.
And it almost makes them feel like they're maybe imprisoned. It's not that they
Yes.
don't love the grandchild, shall we say, or
Mhm.
whatever, but it's like, wait a minute, I was just getting to the point to where I was starting to have some freedom, or even if there's other children there, it's like, not one more, no way, you're
Yay.
responsible for that, you need to take care of it, and I can't have you interfering with my apple cart and upsetting it anymore. So I did this on my own. You're out, you're on your own, and it's like,
Yes.
where do you go? And it is a tough situation, but to be able to do what you're doing and open up that avenue and give young girls a guidance, shall we say, to, a retrieve that hey, you are responsible for this child, you know, and let's get your act together, because when you get your act together, right, now your child can come into that. Let's stop this cycle of
Yes.
having children at 14, at 16, at
16.
18. You know,
And
your body is really not ready for that, you know.
no, and your mind not either. Like it's
No,
completely
no.
not even near. And what I have saw um is these generational cycles. And you know, the Bible talks about it being generational curses. And when we find that when I found myself when I talk to families and I see like 3 generations of
Pattern.
the same the same pattern. Okay, someone needs to stand up and break it, because if not, the next generation is going to happen. And I know that was my story. When I remember I was 16, 15 years old telling people, oh, I'm under a curse. I didn't know what I was talking about. I had no clue. But as I got older, God started revealing me what generational curses was, and then He revealed to me that I was the bloodline breaker. But people don't even know that that's even such thing. But it is, and I was the bloodline breaker. I was the one that will break that cycle, so it won't carry on to my children and their children. But I always knew I was under a curse, and I knew I had to live different. I had to make different decisions, and I had to be different, be the best
You had
version
to be you, the best version
Yes.
of you, and that's what this show
Yes.
is all about: is becoming that best
Mhm.
you that you can be. But first, to recognize that, you know, this habit that I'm running through and repeating, and as you say, the generational things repeating. I like your words when you said that you were going to be the breaker,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that is so powerful, because that's where it needs to start. And to be able to get that message out and know that it's okay to be you, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, you really got to grow up fast when there's that child there, you know. And
Right.
you know, some girls understand that, you know, at that age, okay, I'm going to bite the bullet, I'm going to make the best of this. And then there's other girls that say, you know, this child came into my life, there's got to be someone out there that give them the love and the home that I'm not prepared to do, and to be able
Yeah.
to love that child enough to set them free, right? And go
Mhm.
into a loving home, you know, for
Yes.
someone that's not able to, because that's the unity of coming together, and to have that, and really to help them understand that you're not a bad person if
Mhm.
you give your child up. It takes a lot more to share that child,
Yes.
right,
It
in
takes
that
so
position.
much. Yes, because when you do that, it brings so much shame and condemnation upon
Right,
you
right.
when you give your baby over. So I would say like it takes a stronger person. Like some people say like a person that feels weak. No, them the strongest ones that you would
Yes.
ever be. Because I have to wake up, excuse me, not knowing what was going to be the next day. I didn't know if I was going to wake up and I say the wrong thing and he hit me the wrong way, or I hit him the wrong way and knock him off the box, right? So I didn't know. So I, I got tired of not having the peace, and because I knew it was
Right.
something more in me. I don't. People say like I don't know what I want to do. That little tiny voice that's constantly speaking to you, that you're sitting in a relationship or you're sitting at a job and you're like it's more, because it is more
Right.
in you, and it's more for you to complete. And the dreams that you're having. I have a dream to be an actor. I have a dream to do this. That's what you're called to do. It's not a dream, or it's a dream, but you're going to do it, and you have to step out to find the best part of you and how you can become the best part of you. But it first begins with you. You can't make excuses and say it was your mom's fault, your dad's fault. You have to sit in the mirror and look at yourself and say, what can I do to
Exactly.
change? Because you can either adapt the same bad habits or you can break them. And I know for me, one of the habits that was no one in my family had admitted to, they didn't want to admit that they was bitter. They didn't want to admit
Right.
that they was resentful. Them are harsh words. But I understood if I didn't get in the mirror and face myself and say, I'm not happy with my life, I'm bitter, I'm resentful, I'm jealous. If I didn't put my big girl panties on and say those words, I won't be here today.
I so can relate to that. And we get into these relationships, right? Sometimes we get into them because we want to prove something to someone else, not necessarily ourselves, that we can do this. And so when we have a child at that age, it's almost like a forced thing sometimes, that we connect with the sperm donor, shall we say, right?
Yeah.
And what is love at that age? You don't know.
Right.
Right,
Oh,
and when your
yeah.
background and what you grew up in, this is the word love can be so misused, right? And when you're
Yes.
seeking for someone to care for you, someone to love you unconditionally, a
Mhm.
child gives unconditional love, and when that's lacking and missing in your world, and it's
Mhm.
been there, that void, it's huge,
Yes.
and so you bring this child in thinking that it's
That
going
they
to
gonna
fill
fill
that
that
void,
void.
but it
And it
doesn't,
doesn't.
right? It doesn't
No.
necessarily do that. And then you go one step further and say, okay, I will get connected with this gene pool, I'll live with them, or I'll get married to him, or whatever, and all of a sudden, you know what,
All hell breaks.
that's right. And then what happens? You try to get that love, right?
Yes.
And you end up another roll in the hay. And then all of a
Yes.
sudden, here's another child, and then another child. And you're thinking, what the hell? Right?
Well, yes, and that's how I felt. I was like, how did I get here? I remember one day
Yeah.
I was driving and I was on my way to lose my child care. And at the time, child care for me, because I wasn't an entrepreneur at the time. At the time, I was working at a daycare. Daycares was always very understanding, and they not compromised. They understood my schedule and they understood my life. So
Mm-hmm.
I stayed working at daycares. And I remember I was driving and I was at a stop sign, and I had this inspiration. Now I want you guys to listen to this because you might have had this and didn't understand what it was. I was at the light and I had an inspiration of writing a book. It was just like the happiest feeling I have ever felt. Imagine I was in hell. I was going to get evicted. I didn't know how I was going to feed my kids that day. I was getting punched from every level at that time. And I was at the light and I had this sense of happiness for 2 seconds to write a book and to open up a group home for young girls. And I remember saying this out loud. I want to write a book. I want to write books. I want to travel the world and I want to have a group home. And I was so inspired by the idea. And then the idea went away.
Yeah.
And I have to come back to life. And I'm like, what was that? At the time, I did not know that that was God speaking to me, telling me that that was going to be my future. But I remember at that time living with the person I was with, I wanted to write a story about my life to inspire, encourage, and motivate other women. And he was against it because the story was about him. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
yes. So I asked God, I said, God, get me out of this situation because I don't know. I know you have more for me. I know what I feel, but I feel like I'm inside of a cage and I'm trapped and I
Right.
need to get out of this cage because this is not what I'm supposed to be. And instead of him blessing me with a new car and new place, I got evicted. But that eviction, I can laugh at it now, right?
Oh yeah, but back when you're in it, that's a whole different story,
That's a
isn't
whole other story.
it?
And we got separated. We was able because I had to move back with my mom and he had to go his way. And he ended up going on with someone else who moved on with her. And now with my mom, and I said, you know what? I'm gonna write that book. I'm gonna write that book I want to write. So I start every single day from I started working on me. I started finding out who Shaunice really was. I started
Right.
taking back those labels of teen pregnancy, of molestation, of lack of confidence, of low self-esteem. And when I started taking those labels off of me, then I started walking into who I was really predestined to be. Because a lot of times our labels that we put on ourselves or other people put on us or is hiding the true you, the real you. So
Yes.
once I took those labels off, I was able to write my story. God blessed me with an editor that edited my book for free. So now I have a book out. The same inspiration I had 3 years ago to write a book is now published.
Oh, that just gives me chills, and
Yes.
thank you for sharing that because that is so critical. As you said, labels, and I can relate to that because my story is a little bit similar on that avenue, and those labels are creating an identity of something that you're not, right? I mean, I was referred to as being so-and-so's mom, the lady who wrote for the newspaper, the one that did this, the one that did that, right? And it's like, wait a minute, I have a name, right? I have a name. And, so it's coming out of that, and getting into these relationships. I was a very, very, very strong little rebel, and I was actually 21 when I had my first child. So, but I had sex one time, I was pregnant.
Wow.
One time. Then I had sex again, and I was pregnant. Then I had sex again, and I was pregnant. And it was like, you know what? My mom had 11 of us. I'm not going there.
You're like my oldest. We was talking one day, and I asked him, I said, how many kids do you want? My son said, I want one, and I'm done. I'm not dealing with all this.
And so, and again, when I told my mom that I was pregnant, right, I was 7 months along, right, and I didn't show, right, and she goes, the first thing out of her mouth is, you don't have to get married. Well, what is little rebel me gonna do, right? Oh, yes, I am. Tell me I'm not gonna do something. I was gonna do it, and so I. And so,
that was me. You told me not to do it. I'm gonna do it anyway.
That's right. I'll show you, right? Yeah. Well, guess who got shown, right? But I mean, I look at the situation, and my kids were here because they were my saving grace. They were all under the age of 5, and I knew where I was, like you, not where I wanted to be, right? And it's like I was in the Midwest. I grew up in Iowa. I was in this farm country, But I had dreams. I had big dreams. I wanted to travel. I wanted to see the world. There was so much I was doing with my life, and this wasn't it. And anger. You talked about bitterness. Bitter and angerness kind of go conjunction, right? And I was so full of that anger and that hate. And I decided one night that I was done. So I took a walk, and I was going to check off the planet. So I was going to figure out how I was going to do this. So as I'm walking down the gravel road, because there's a lot of space in Iowa, just like there's a lot of space in Indiana, right?
Yes.
And I started giving God a piece of my mind. And I raised hell, and I screamed, and I yelled, and I cried, and I let that anger come out. And I blamed everyone out there.
Yeah.
But once I exhausted myself, I had an aha moment, because the voice says, okay, well, who's going to take care of your kids if you're not here to take care of them? Whoa, slap into reality. I hear my dad's voice say, if you have these kids, you're the one that needs to take care of them. Your mom and I aren't going to do that. We got enough of our own, right? Now, I'm second oldest of 11. I get that.
Right.
I get that. Because my youngest sister was actually just 1 year older than my oldest son. So she was more like a daughter to me than a sister, because she grew up with my kids. Right, and she still is. She comes to me from other things and stuff, which is awesome. But, so that changed my life. That was my first aha moment. And it's like, okay, right? And it's like, fine. That means I got to be here for a long time, because they're all under the age of 5, right? I was 24, right? This is back in 1974.
I'm about to live for.
So this was in 1974, a long time ago. You probably weren't even born yet. This... so it's like, okay, then this is the deal, because the big show on TV was Monty Hall. Let's make a deal, right? And so it's like, fine, then let's make a deal. I want out of this dead-end marriage. I want out of Iowa. I mean, I had this list, right? I said, so there. Right. What do you say to that? And this voice goes, okay. I'm like, what? Well, okay, that was easy. It's like, now what I do, right? And it's like, so, okay, you said okay to this, so what do I need to do here? And the voice says, mind over matter. Like, what the hell is mind over matter? Now, in the 70s, guarantee, there was none of the stuff that there is out there today.
Right.
right? So who do you talk to? I mean, we had psychiatry and psychology and stuff like that, but then you got a stigma if you went to a shrink, because that's what we
Right.
labeled them, right? And it's like, I'm not going there. Well, nobody will listen to me. So it was like, well, whoever this voice is paying attention, right? So whatever
Right.
this mind over matter thing is, so what does that mean? And then the voice says to me, begin to live your life for you and your children only. I can do that. Okay. Because I knew at that time, if I didn't get my act together, right? Like you, if you didn't
Right.
get your act together, how were you going to give these children what they came here to receive?
Yes.
And so, again, it's going into that inner working of who you are, right? And growing right alongside of your children. And
Yes.
keeping those lines of communication open. It's very important to let these little infants know what's going on. And don't let them guess. Don't let them assume. Don't let them feel guilty because now they think it's it's their fault that all this is happening when in essence it's
Right.
not. Right?
Right.
And sometimes that's the hardest conversation that you can have with your child, right? Have you found that
Yes. I
when
know
you
for
started?
me, the
Yeah.
hardest conversation I have to have with my children, they saw everything. They saw the fight. They saw
Right.
the arguing. And they saw anger. They saw an
Yes.
angry mother. And this is the thing I said when I had my children. I am not going to be an angry, bitter mother. And I was.
Yes.
I was. And I said, I don't want to raise them like this. And I had the aha moment like you did. If I was to separate myself from this relationship and leave this relationship, I could potentially be the first person I married to someone that really do love me.
Right.
I can actually have a business that I desire within me. I can actually publish this book if I was to separate from this relationship. But you're talking about separating from someone I was with for 13 years. So
Right.
I had created a complete false identity that's not true. I was so committed to my false identity that when it was time to walk in my true identity, I had a
Oh,
hard
that's a little
time
scary. Yeah. It
to
is.
walk away.
Yeah. And it is a hard conversation, and I let my kids know what was going on. I mean, I actually started doing my own thing. I had a radio show back then that I was involved with. I was letting them know what was going on. And it's like we're going to move into a situation that is better. And
Right.
we moved from farm country Iowa out to Denver, Colorado. You talk about, extremes, right? But
Right.
this is where we're going. In this situation, having an uncomfortable do life and believe that this is the way a relationship needs to be. It's not. We're
Yeah.
going to find a better way, and we're going to do this together. So now you have one of two things that you can do. You can, because you can't take care of yourself. They were 8, 9, and 10. You can't take care of yourself.
Right.
So mom is the one that's going to take care of you, because obviously dad isn't going to be there for that, right?
Right.
And so this is where we're going to start a new life. You can buckle down, make the best of it, get your education, right? And all of that. And if you need to move back, if you feel you want to move back to Iowa when you reach that 18 and you're on your own, hey, be my guest. Or
Right.
you can rebel, you can get on drugs, you can run away, you can get in
Right.
trouble, whatever it is. But remember one thing. The only impact it's going to have on anyone is you.
You.
This is your choice. It's not going to
Yes.
hurt me. It's not
Yes.
going to hurt me. It's going to hurt you.
For you.
You make that choice and go with it.
Yes. And I talk to my son because he's 14. So I talk to him like that as well. I
Yeah.
tell him I'm not going to judge you because I was just a lot coming up of what my decisions. So I told him I'm not going to judge you. I'm going to tell you X, Y, and Z. And if you, whatever decision you make from this moment is on you, buddy. It's
Yeah.
not on me.
And that is
Because I
such a
gave you.
it's such a
Yes.
hard conversation, isn't it? But
Yes.
thank God they took the
Yes.
first choice. And then
Yay!
yes, I was fortunate to have someone come into our lives after we moved to Colorado. Probably about, I think we moved out there right after school, right? So it was the 1st of June, and that December, someone came into our lives, and he was there for a weekend, right? And then he had gone for 2 weeks over to Europe, and he came back. But there was something there. There was a magnetic pull there. He fell in love with my kids before he fell in love with me, right? And
That's
started,
it.
yeah, and
That's it.
started building that relationship, right? And he filled that gap. And again, it was another discussion, especially with my oldest, because he was more sensitive, because he had a different, relationship with the dad. And but their dad moved out of their life. He just separated themselves when we moved to Denver, and didn't have nothing to do with them, and how do you explain that? I never lied to them. I never talked down about him. It's just like, I don't know what's going on in his head, and I can't change that. All I know is we need to focus on making us
Right.
a better,
Right.
and making our world here. And so this gentleman that's in our life right now, it's like, I get where you're going. He's not looking to take the place of your dad. He's here to be a father figure. He's here because he loves you and he cares about you. Right?
Okay.
So just do yourself a favor. Whatever. Just take 2 weeks. 2 weeks to get to know this person and everything about them. And then if you don't like him, you don't ever have to talk to him again. You don't ever have to be you can just ace them out of your life. But you're doing yourself an injustice, and them as well, by not getting to know them, by saying they are not a good person, because you haven't listened to them. You haven't got to know who they are before you make the decision to keep them in your life or not. This is something you need to learn now at this age, because the older you get and you're in a job or you're in your own business, you need to have that connection.
Okay, go up there. I'm sorry, that was my son.
Right. Right. And so when you look at that from that perspective, right, then what do you do? And so he said, okay, Mom. 3 or 4 days later, he'd come to me and he goes, oh my gosh, he's really a good guy. And the bond that they created for the next 20 some years was so heartwarming. Right.
And I can't wait to my children, because right now I'm not dating anyone right now.
Right.
And I can't wait till my children is able to experience that,
Right.
because they're so used to, they have an awesome relationship with their dad, but they're used to just, seeing the dysfunctional side. I want them to see something that's normal.
Functional. Right.
Yes. And so we haven't found that, but God will send it in due time. It will. I'm not going to rush it.
No, and you can't push it. You can't force that, right? Because it doesn't work that way.
I'm so sorry. Go upstairs now. Now.
This is what happens when you're raising children. This is what takes place. So this is kind of good, so what do you do? And now we're in that social distancing thing too, and the kids have to go home.
Yes, and that's the thing. When they was at school and I was working from home, and I do my live videos, because I have a broadcast that come on live on Facebook every Thursday at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. So when I'm on my live and they come down, I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We're quarantined right now, so they just come down.
And that's okay. That's okay. That's part of life, right? And that's the real world, right?
Trying to find that balance. Yes, it is. And when I first they don't go back to school until next year. So when I first got the gist that they don't go back to school until next year, I was like, how am I going to do this?
And again, we get resourceful, right? And so where do we go from here? You can't change what's out there. You can only change what's here, Right,
Yes.
regardless of what that is. And so when you're starting to look at it from that perspective and everything, that's what it needs to be. Right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so again, it's being open to communicate with your kids, to let
Yes.
them know what's going on, because if you don't let them know what's going on, they're going to assume things, and then they're going to hold guilt upon themselves, which continues to build that.
It's like the water. And it waters the seed, and before you know it, you have a big tree of unforgiveness, a big tree of doubt, and just you like, how did I get here? From a seed.
Yeah,
A
and
small
those
little
roots on that tree go deep,
seed.
deep.
So it's like depending on the amount of some of the girls ask
Right.
me, my friends ask me, how did you actually break free? Because it's hard to break free when you have deep roots. And I'm like, you have to chop at those roots every single day.
Right.
You have to chop at that tree, whatever thought, the bondage thoughts, because it's one thing to be out of a situation, but still think like the situation is even worse. That's a
It is,
whole other ballgame.
and it takes a strong person. But if you don't go into that inner essence of who you are, and you have connection with that higher source, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
it makes a huge difference. But it's that higher source of connection with your higher consciousness in you. Right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
then, because if you want to reach that subconscious where all that old stuff is stored, you need to have a communication with your higher consciousness, because it's the higher consciousness that taps into the subconscious, to where now
Yes.
you can work as a unit, conscious, subconscious, and higher consciousness, right? Now you're working together. And that subconscious is just like your children running around.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
And it says, hey, okay. But the thing is it knows where you put those roots, where you put that old belief, that old database of bitterness that's connected to the unknown, the rebel you, and all this kind of stuff, the ego, I know better things.
Right.
You don't know what you're talking about, Mom, right? Oh, yeah.
And she did, and I did it.
And yeah, she did, darn,
Yes.
And so it's learning from other people's mistakes. But again, it's that communication, right? And how we open to have that communication. Where do we go from here, right?
Yeah.
So and it's not easy. It's simple.
Yes.
But it's not easy.
But it's not easy. And that's so powerful, because it's simple. It sounds so simple when we say, deal with you.
Right.
Get in the interview. And you're like, yeah. And then when it's time to deal with you, you like, I don't know how. I never saw it.
I don't want to see this.
I never want to see it. I saw a post on Facebook. Yes. And it was so powerful. And a lot of someone made a post. They said a lot of people are upset because they kept on trying to go around themselves to deal with themselves.
Right.
Now you're in quarantine and you have no choice but to deal with you.
That's exactly right. Because we are in that blame game, right? It's somebody else's fault out there. I know when I was going through my little aha moment thing, and I was really blasting out there to God, right? Where the anger and the stuff that I had was actually with my father. Right? And so I would take these walks, and that anger started coming up, and to just implode it and just yell and scream and get it out and just release it, and after a couple, walks with all that anger coming out, it's exhausting. And then again, now you have the space to listen to what your guidance is, right? And then the aha moment was, I don't hate my dad. I'm not angry with my dad. I'm angry with myself for my interpretation, the reaction that I had from an action he took that I interpreted with my database of information to get myself into this mess.
Yes.
Right?
And that's the whole thing. We take, one woman once said that when the spirit of offense arises, look within. What data did you take in and you put there, you did it, and now you get offended when someone says something, but it's a data that you downloaded. It's a reaction
Right.
that you downloaded. So now, like I tell a person, I tell the ones that I mentor and I talk to, and they say I get so upset when she say this or she say that, and I tell them a part of that you believe. You might not believe the whole thing. Like so, for me, I was called a bad mom at 17, 18. And I used to get so upset. But a part of that, I believed it because I had heard it so much and I
Right.
downloaded it in my database
Yep.
and I actually believed it. So when someone said it, I got upset and I was ready to fight.
Right.
Until I started working at this daycare and this woman said to me, I was 22, I never forget it. She said to me, "You are such a good mom." I am.
Yeah.
I
You're
heard
like,
I
who
was
you
there.
talking to, right?
Me? Me? And I work with other people's kids and other people, the moms will come up to me and like, "You do such a good job with so and so. How do you do this?" And I'm thinking to myself, you're coming to ask me for advice for your child, and I've been called a bad mom for 5 years. I got to be a good mom somewhere. It has to be deep down. So once I stopped believing the lie, so then when they started saying it, it was like a little feather. It had no more power over me because I
Exactly.
knew I was a good mom.
Exactly.
So if
You,
they was to say it in anger and frustration, I wouldn't react to it because I know they're saying it out of anger and frustration, and I no longer believe it.
right. And that's a key element here, with that. And to get that, at that early age and stuff too is awesome. But to pay attention. Again, it's that awareness. To pay attention, as to where it is because it's that cell memory. And when it gets buried into us and just, driven in, it becomes a habit and a personality trait that needs to be shifted, right?
Right.
However you shift that and get, like you say, that root out, not masking it, not trying to bury it, but to
Mhm.
regurgitate it and eliminate it. Surrender
Yes.
to it, and you win, right?
Yes.
Right?
Surrender. And I think a lot of people have a hard time surrendering
Yeah,
anything.
yeah,
I know for me, it was real hard to surrender, um, to let go of my kid's father. It was because it was scary. This is who I, even though it's bad and dysfunctional,
hmm,
but I know this, and this is comfort. Please don't let me make it go. And
yeah,
God is like, let it go some more.
and
Thank you. Now
yeah.
I can release something better to you.
Yeah, and that's great that you listen to that because we do. We get in that comfort zone, as miserable as it is. It's comfortably miserable because it's predictable.
Yes,
The
yes,
unknown out here is not. And so we
yes,
automatically assume what's on the other side is going to be worse instead of better because we've been programmed to that.
yes,
So
yes.
when I have clients come to me, right, with that fear thing, look at the fear that's going on now with the situation in the world, right? The same thing. That fear of the unknown, what's going to happen here, right?
Right.
Right.
Yes,
And so where do they go to? It goes into the scarcity mentality and what do we do and the running scared and the hiding because it's like the boogeyman is out there to get us. Well, you know what? The boogeyman is here. Right?
yes. The
It's
boogeyman is here. Yes,
yeah.
yes.
So
And so
it's
when you shift your mentality and say, "I'm going to go outside,"
yeah.
pray about it, wash your hands, go get your groceries, come back home. It's that simple.
It is just that simple. There is an abundance out there of everything, and you make what's on the other side of that fence
Yes.
what you desire and what you're
Hmm.
worthy of, and to make
Yes.
that best you and your best situation, and not get caught up in the fear because it spirals you this way,
Yes.
right? And the universe is filled with abundance of all kinds, abundance of thought. Where is your thought
Hmm.
going? Right?
Yeah.
Where is
And
it
I
driving you?
coach. I have a community on Facebook. It's called One Healed Whole Mama. And someone asked this question because I feel like if the mother is healed and whole, the children can be healed and whole and function. And what they want to adapt to dysfunction because that's not their norm,
Right.
right? So I created a community for women to come and to talk about their feelings and how they can be whole and complete and be the best them that they can be. And she asked the
Exactly.
question, she said, "How are you guys holding up at this time?" And I said, my response was, I do inventory of my thoughts. If, because I know if your thought is very sorry and sorrowful and want to cry, you're gonna cry. But if you have thoughts of happiness and joy and abundance and fruitfulness, guess what you're gonna produce? You're
That's right.
gonna produce that.
Yeah.
So if I constantly, oh, the kids is at home, oh, they don't go back to school for next year, if I'm constantly thinking about that, then guess what? I'm gonna be angry and aggravated for a very long time.
Well, and your energy, how you think up here, your body responds, and that vibrates out there.
Yeah.
And kids are very sensitive, and all people are sensitive, and they're going to pick up on what that energy is. So it's
Yes.
making that best you that you can be, and to again that
Mhm.
mindset and to shift. Don't deny yourself those other thoughts. Recognize them, and then
Mhm.
change them. Right, and that
Yes.
changes that habit and that belief, and working with it. Is it easy? No. Is it simple? Yes.
No.
But if you're
Yes.
consistent with it, the change happens. Right,
Yes.
right.
And that's the key, consistency. Because I know for me, I know I was wired this way. I will start strong, and then I will go back to bad habits. It was so
Right.
easy to go back to the bad thinking pattern. 'Cause it was easier to do that. Oh, it's easy to think this way,
Right,
and it's simple to say it, but it's easy to think this way. But it takes consistency, especially if you want to change.
right,
You have to repeat the real you, who you was called to be.
right,
You have to start believing that, and so you have to repeat that over, 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 and over, till it
right,
actually becomes till you believe it, till your mind believe it, your inner man actually believes who you was really called to be, and not this false identity and this false person that you have believed you were for so many years. So you have to ask yourself,
yep,
what part of this have I believed that's a lie? And once you do that uprooting, then you can start walking into who you was really called to be. That dream that you have of having that TV show or writing that book,
right.
that's who you really are, and that's who you need to tap into to bring forth, because the world needs what you have. You don't think the world needs what you have, but everybody
But
got a
it
story.
does.
Yes, yes. Someone needs your story to break through. I tell my girls, your story, you're angry at your story, but your story is the roadmap to someone else's success.
Yeah. Well, it's what drives you to become that better you. Don't
Mm-hmm.
use it as a detriment, as something to be in a victim role. It's like, wait a minute.
Yes,
This is a lesson that I can share. And the more you share it, the more power you gain in the essence of who you really are. Right?
yes,
And it's
yes.
okay to share and to get through that, and allow yourself to become vulnerable. Like, I remember the first time, it was in the early 80s, right? And I was working with a group of people in Denver, to come into your power and stuff like that. It was through civil mind control, right? And so we're working on this, and we had to go face to face, and it's like look into each other's eyes, and see what's in them and what they're made of and everything, and then become totally vulnerable, right? And boom, down
Yes.
goes the walls, right? And then because you had to say, I allow myself to become vulnerable. So here I go. It's like I allow myself to be. I could not even say the word. That's
That is hilarious. You couldn't even
no,
say
I
it.
couldn't. I couldn't. It's like, okay, I allow myself to be, and it's like, what the heck, right? And it took me a while, and I think it was like after the third or fourth time, and this was like the last class that they were going to do on this specific thing, right? And I had the same partner, right? And I knew him very well. We were really good friends and everything through this whole thing, and this was the last time, and so here we are again, face to face, right? And it came to say that, and I said, I give myself permission to be vulnerable. No walls went down. The energy and the lift up and the power I felt, it put me in tears, and
Wow.
we cried together. I mean, it was very impactful. And again, it was those
Mhm.
aha moments. When the time is right, it will happen. Don't give
Right.
up on yourself.
Yes.
And now there's so much out there and the support from others. It's not about repeating your story continuously to live and wallow in it. It's to recognize your story and where you can change that story. It's not about fixing something because you're not broken. It's about
Right.
making the shift in the old database, get it out, put the new database in, and pick up yourself, pull up them, like you say, big girl panties, and go forth and change, because you are changing your bloodline. And what you're
Yes.
doing here, Shani, is so powerful to change, because what you change in here alters your DNA, which is going to make an impact on your past generational things, your bloodline going sideways, and the bloodline to come.
Yes.
Right? And
I
that
need
is what's impactful. And the more you do this, it breaks that cycle.
Yes.
And so what you're doing here, kudos off to you. Keep up the great work. And,
Thank you.
And thank you so much for sharing. And,
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh,
It was a
it's
joy.
been great. Tell the people how they can get a hold of you if they want.
You can follow me on Facebook at I Am Kingdom Connection. And you can also follow me on my website, and that's where I post like my upcoming events, parentingwithsavvy.com. And if you want a one-on-one session with me for mentoring, I do free 30-minute consultations, and I also have different packaging for you as well. You can go over to my website, parentingwithsavvy.com, and fill out a form, and I get back at you at my earliest convenience. And you can find my book on Amazon at it's called Heal Soul Trauma, Healing from a Broken Soul by Shaunice Jones.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And again, thank you so much. The message here today is very powerful, and your story is so beautiful. And I'm sure every one of those little rugrats that are running around there are going to grow up and be that powerful little being, because they have a great teacher that they can learn from. And again, go out there and be that beautiful spirit that you are, and keep changing the world, because you are making a difference in every single one of you out there. I want you to know that you make a difference. So go out there, be that best you that you can be, because what? Shawnee and I are going to be the best we that we can be, right?
Yes.
There we go. And again, thank you all for joining us. Comment below, reach out if you want to connect with either one of us. Comment. That's what that box is for, right? So let's make a difference and change the world, because your story matters. Thank you again, Shani, and we're going to call it a show, and we'll see you all on the next show.
All right.